Good morning, everybody. Cowboy, aka Nick, here, and we have a special guest today, Erik Holt. Erik, we have all of your contact information, your any of your links. It's all in the description. And Erik is somebody who has literally risked it all, and this is something that's kind of rare. We live in a comfortable society where a lot of people go along to get along. And Erik, you saw some things. You saw some election fraud and you were willing to risk it all and sacrifice a lot to fight that. So I'm going to just kind of let you tell your story. But before we do that, make sure you go to the description, go click his links, look at his website, support this guy. This is somebody who laid it on the line for us. Also, paid sponsor Algo Factory, free Algo is in that link as well. Erik, how you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Nick. Thanks for having me on, brother.
It's my pleasure, man. Like I told you, before we hit go here, watching your podcast over on Tommy Kerrigan's channel, like Tommy said, hey, you got to have this guy on. And like I said, it's just on his recommendation. I'd bring you on either way. But watching your podcast there, wow, man, you have sacrificed a lot, and you're doing it really for your country, and that's kind of a rare thing anymore. So, can you kind of tell us just from the start what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give a little background how I ended up in it. So I was in the army out of high school. I like to just say, we were a nation at war, and I was an 18-year-old fit young man. That's kind of the natural progression. So I did 5 years in the army, deployed to Iraq, 05, 06 in the city of Ramadi. Learned a lot of, hard knock lessons there. And then once I returned, I had about a year and a half left on my contract. So my MOS was firefighter. I was actually really lucky to find that slot uh, when it was time to, be able to honorably discharge or re-enlist. I was positioned super well to start my professional firefighting career. So I got out immediately, like on a Friday, I got out, and Monday morning I started at the fire department as a firefighter. So I worked for the Department of Defense, or Department of War now, uh, for 18 total years. That includes my active duty time. But as life kind of goes along over the years, I had a divorce from my wife, and had two daughters, and so that was as nasty as divorces can get.
Oh,
So in 2022, because of that whole situation, the court granted me full custody of both of my daughters, and so working 48-hour shifts at the fire department was manageable, but not, the life I wanted for my two girls that, now I want to be home with them. So, local department and opportunity sort of as I'm figuring this out, and had some turmoil. I'll just say that. Like I knew the department, I lived in the area, but this is like during the COVID era. So I moved into this community during COVID. I didn't know anybody. I remember we're on lockdown, and nobody comes outside, and nobody so you don't know. I don't know if people kind of remember that window of time, but like you just didn't get to know your neighbors super well back then. So
kind of suppressing those memories at this point, but yeah.
I think all of the country is. So anyways, like I was on the county's incident management team. Um and so I was known in there, but turmoil erupts in this fire department. uh their chief they had hired and the board had some issues. I won't go into that, it's not my business. But basically I get a call on a Saturday morning. It was like, hey man, we need somebody to step in, be an interim chief, kind of stabilize this situation. We had, most of the board has resigned. The chief's on, paid leave pending this investigation stuff. We need somebody to stabilize it and kind of help us kind of figure out what's going on. And so that was supposed to be a 2-week commitment. That turned into 5 months. And during that 5 months is when the court stuff kind of played out, you know what I mean? And so after 18 years of federal service, I'm knocking on the door of a full pension, all that stuff. But my girls are number one every single day of the week, every every day of the year. So I literally resigned the position that I had held for all those years with no guarantees. I'm in an interim position, uh, you know, but my girls are of age where I can talk to them, and I told them, look, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm I'm in a position. I've done well in this interim role and kind of stabilized things, and um, coming from a very professional world, was able to kind of pass some of that on. So like I was confident, but there was no guarantees. You know what I mean? It was kind of throw caution to the wind and let's do it. So in September 2022, after serving for 5 months, so April 2022 is when that interim term started. Um, I had gotten to a point where I had exhausted all of my leave, and literally, my fire chief at the time was like, "Hey, man, you got to make a decision here," and I was just like, "Yeah, here's my resignation. I'm going forward." So I was fortunate enough in September 2022 to be selected as the permanent chief, and um, due to all the contentiousness that had existed, and I will say I didn't create a whole lot of friends. I came in with a professional mindset, and anybody that didn't meet a standard, either required training and there was a path to it, or they left, and most chose to leave in a small department, right? Um, and I believe firmly that, like, when you are in emergency response and you're a first responder, the standards are at the absolute highest. Your decisions, your training, your experience make the difference in somebody's life or death, their home surviving or not. So I will stand fervent in that decision that, if you can't meet the standards, then you don't have a place here in this department. But that did create enemies for sure, especially in small towns, right? Um, so when I was offered the job, I presented a vision to the board to professionalize the department. And so at that time, you're talking like 4 or 5 inexperienced, uncertified firefighters that were volunteers, and I presented a path to professionalize the department, make high standards, and build a culture, and got to work on that. I mean, immediately I had the board support, and a little foreshadowing into the situation. So, because of all that turmoil and the board resignations and all that stuff, uh, the board actually had to be reconstituted. So, the county commissioners held this special process through, attorneys and all the stuff to reconstitute that board, and appointed people to establish a quorum again. Board got filled out. They made the hiring decision, all that stuff. So, I'll fast forward um, from September until January. I focused on the metrics. I focused on building that culture and the vision. And so we went from a department with 4 or 5 responders, an average response time of 18, 19 minutes. Uh, Nobody was qualified. You couldn't put an entire engine of qualified people to go on a call if there was a fire, right? And response times were my number one metric. Uh,
So basically what's happened here is that you were so close to having a pension from the military, but you wanted to be with your daughters because they rely completely on you. From I can guess as to why you got full custody. We need to go into that.
yeah.
And I've been through that personally as a child. So what I would say is that already you're willing to risk full pension where you could just kind of kick back, maybe get something part time. But the need for taking care of your family was enough for you to just kind of say, hey, forget it. You became fire chief. You whipped this fire department basically into shape where response times were cut down in a big way. Seems to me they're even having a hard time, getting guys out beforehand to the scene, right? That sound about right?
Yeah, yeah, it's exactly like there are metrics for these things, right? And so yeah, if you want to, or your listeners, right, hold your breath right now and feel how long that is while you're not breathing. So imagine dialing 911 and like a difficulty breathing, or your loved one is unconscious. Um, 18 minutes is 19 minutes is a super long time, and then what you would get is, you might get an EMT, you might not, within that time span. And so by January of 2023, um, it's the last data that I still have, I can look back to,
Mhm.
but we hit a 7-minute response time, which is a national standard for fire department responses. So it's called an aggregate response time. It's from the time you were to dial 911 until somebody that's qualified arrives on scene to help you. So we were.
So obviously, you're performing, you're doing well. Let's move to what actually happened as far as, the election situation.
Yeah. So in May of 2023, because of all the turmoil, all 5 board of director seats are up for election. And because of, the standards I set and allegiances in small town America, there was a very contentious election building up. And so that took place May 2nd, 2023 at the fire station. Because it was super contentious, I wasn't there. The board had voted to hire the law firm that represented the district to administer the election, so that it's a third party ran by legal, right? Seems like a pretty good decision to me. Um, and so day of election, I'm working from home. I literally give them the key card access to the station. They run it there. Um, and it was agreed upon I wouldn't be present. Uh, but emergency services being what it is, I ended up there. So a gentleman had a medical call, which was a very high acuity call. So we called for a medevac helicopter. That landing location is at the fire station. So now it places me there, kind of in between. So unfortunately, the person from that call passes away after CPR attempts and all that. And my job as the fire chief is to go and now console the family and inform them. So I leave my chief vehicle there, go to the family, I deal with that. That's not fun, that sucks. But I eventually come back. When I'm getting back in my command vehicle at the station to go back home and work from home, I get a citizen complaint. And the citizen complaint was very alarming to me. And so my action at that point was, all right, let me take you to the designated election official who is statutorily by law and paid to administer the election. Let me take you to that person, lodge that complaint. So I do that. And I'll come back to what that complaint was. But uh, after the election day is over, it's like a 12-hour ordeal, right? I have to go and then secure the fire station, get my key card back, shut the doors, blah blah blah. And in that, the designated election official just looked like she had been through a 15-round boxing match, right? Just beat down. And I was like, you okay? Can you make it like the 2-hour drive home? And she's like, it was just the craziest day. Like, this is not how things are supposed to go. At that point, we knew that this group that had ran as a slate of 5, so literally like a motto of like vote for one of us, vote for all 5 of us, had won, that were non-incumbents. So this like opposing force, right?
Gotcha. Yeah,
Uh,
it's tough to get out an incumbent. So already, that's a something to think about.
right. And
As a
in
slate
the
of 5.
incumbents had all the success of this department that had been built since September of prior, so like 9 months, like they had something to run on. It wasn't just kind of nothing. So that was surprising. But my job as fire chief was not to be, to have allegiance to any individual of the board. My allegiance was to my firefighters, to the community, to do my job, right? And so, although I was surprised, it didn't affect me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Gotcha.
Well, I thought it wouldn't, but there's a reason I'm on this show and talking to you, right? So,
At the time. Yeah.
yeah. So, like in the next day or two after, and I will say from that complaint that I had gotten and passed to the DO, this is where a knot started in my belly. Okay, and I was like, I don't like this. And then the conversation with the designated election official added to that. There's some anomalies in the voting. Uh, all of the winning candidates had like a 3%, one to two, 3% spread on total votes, right? So somewhat explainable in that they said vote for one, vote for all, so it should be pretty close, I guess. But like most voters aren't paying attention to that. They're selecting boxes, right? So to have that close of a spread on vote tallies, I guess. And then there was 3 times as many votes that we had seen in historical votes on that one day, which also can somewhat be explained by contentious elections that draw people out, right? But 3 times the amount, I don't know. So all this is kind of building this knot in my stomach, and day or two later, I'm in the local grocery store, or whatever, and another person comes up and they're like, "Hey, I really want to talk to you about what happened when I went to cast my ballot." And I'm like, "Well, that's you're not supposed to talk to me about that. I'm the fire chief. Like, there's a person." But they tell me like, "Oh well, I was being recorded when I went in there, and like nasty stares, nasty comments." And I'm like, "Being recorded by who?" Like, "Oh, the poll watchers sitting at that table were like recording me with their phones." And I was like, "Hold on, all right." So I called the DEO again, and I'm like, "Hey, this is what I just heard. We're a couple days post election." And she's like, "I've gotten a couple other, I think there's something to be concerned with here. Like our degree of concern is lifting, right? And this is a law firm, so they're not going to ignore complaints or law violations or anything." So now that knot is really tightening up, and so I get the best way to explain it is, man, like I'm a single dad, right? I go home every night. I take care of two teen girls. I look them in the face as we eat dinner. We hang out at night. I put them to bed. Very close to my girls. I mean, I still tuck them into bed at teenage years, right? And I know that at this point, my best personal interest is not to do anything, to stay away from all this, right? And I've got to look at these girls and grapple with how I'm feeling with that knot, but my responsibility to take care of them. And that leads heavy into the kind of the next segment. I cook them dinner, I spend an evening with them, put them to bed, and I'm sitting there and I can't get this stuff off my mind. And I'm just like, all right, man, like, what are you going to do? You can't grapple these feelings forever, right? So I literally make a conscious decision, knowing my best interest is not to do this. But my civic duty and what I believe in and my morals says to me over and over and over again until I literally have to face this decision. Like, you can't ignore it, man. Everything that you believe in, the oath I took to this country, the reasons I went to war, all these things are building, just to kind of lay that foundation for all your listeners. Um, and so ultimately it culminates with me saying, all right, I'm looking into it. And that conversation I had internally was, I know what that means. That means if I find something, I can't turn away from it. And so I wake up the next day, I go to work. When I get off of work, I go to Walmart, buy a couple thumb drives, and I go to this private company that hosts the contract for the security surveillance system of the fire station. And I go, "Hey, like, I'm here to get footage." And it's an important factor in everything is that, like, if you have a public building that's taxpayer funded, it's a public building. And so I didn't go there with some sort of like, "Oh, I have a positional access to this stuff." I didn't. It was a board contract. They bought the security system. They paid this company to maintain it, as any company would do for a security system. So I just kind of went there as an individual after work and said, "I need May 2nd cameras from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the hours of the election. Here's the thumb drive that I paid for out of my own pocket, and let me know when it is." And they're like, "Okay, it'll be something like 150 grand,
So
150 bucks,
to be
right?"
clear, you didn't do this as, "Hey, I'm the fire chief." You did it as a public citizen, not in your capacity as leadership for the
Yeah,
fire
and
station.
yeah, 100%. And that is very important in the story. But yeah, I'm plain clothes out of my own personal expenses. Never once, "Hey, I'm here as the chief of this fire department," right? This is A lot of people don't understand the role between like the board and the fire chief. Chief runs operations, leads, trains firefighters, right? The board does finance stuff. And so if you have a contract that another party is being paid through, that's a board responsibility and authority that the chief doesn't dictate. So even if I did go in per se, let's argue the other side of that. If I went in as the fire chief, they would say, we don't have to listen to the fire chief, we listen to the board, right? So just to kind of clear that up. But anyways, like a day, maybe 2 days later, they call me and they're like, "Hey, so you pick up?" I go in, I swipe my personal bank account card, pick it up. And I always say, man, that's a different feeling. Now I'm holding something. Like I've gotten this at I've never held anything radioactive, but that's the closest thing I could probably think. There's like a tingling when it touches your skin. um, because now I'm facing what I know is a decision that's going to impact something if I find something in. So I don't know what I'm looking for. I have no clue what's on this thumb drive. I've never dealt with election anything. I think I had voted at that time in like two presidential elections and never voted in anything else. Just the typical average American working, raising kids. And so I go home. I'm doing everything in life I can to not sit down and start watching this stuff because I'm trying to wrap my head around what I'm even going to look for. But again, put the girls to bed, sit down with my laptop, and I was like, I don't know what to look. I don't know what I'm gonna find. And so I just was like, all right, let me figure out what rules are. So I go on Google, I search Colorado election laws, I print it out, I read through it, and in there was um poll watcher rules. They're like,
Okay.
1 through 15, 16, whatever, how many there are, right? But they're numbered things. And so I was like, okay, that's super helpful because the complaint that I received said it poll watchers. This adds up to me. So I literally start and to this isn't a short exercise. Like I'm telling the story 2.5 years later, but like it's 48 hours worth of footage. Um, it's four cameras on a 12-hour day, broken into 1 hour segments, and that's how the thumb drive came. And so literally, I sit down, camera one, and I start watching hour one. Right, and I'm literally just following along with the rules. And so they're basic rules. Poll watchers are not allowed to have electronic recording devices. They're not allowed to tabulate votes. They're not allowed to interfere with the election process. Yeah, very basic things I think everybody kind of would understand as like common sense. Uh, but the first thing that I caught, and I'll segue into this. If any of your listeners go to my Justice for Hope Facebook or TikTok, these videos are on there for people to see, like the actual surveillance videos. I hide nothing in this now. So the first thing I see is a lady open her laptop at the poll watchers. So how the camera was facing was if you were looking long view of the room, you enter the fire station and the camera is on the far back corner. And the poll watching table is directly under the camera. So you have a great vantage point of that. And then forward would be where the voters walk in behind the screens. So you've got a really good view of the inside of the building. And so the lady is sitting at her poll watcher station and she flips open her laptop, which is a violation of the rules, i.e., that's breaking the law, right? So I tally it. Boom. I put a tally mark. Oh, that's one. And then like I freeze the clip and you can see that she's recording the station room. And I'm like, oh, that's another law violation, right? So I just start going through it. And I watched 48 hours of stuff and I tallied everything I saw. And then I like stared at it and I'm like, there's hundreds and hundreds, man, of violations of law that are spelled out in the statutes of Colorado election law, i.e., to a very naive layperson, that's breaking the law hundreds of times. And so I go, man, all right, good job. Like there's something here, but now I'm at a precipice, right? Like I already said, I can't turn away from this. How is this a scheme? How is this something that like isn't just haphazard violations of law? And so I have to do some digging. So what I end up doing, right, is I go back to the beginning and I start to look for if there's a scheme. Now that I know that these violations have happened, I can correlate the two things. And so the first thing that catches my attention is you can see voters walk in the front door, you know, check in with an election judge, be handed their ballot, go to the polling screens, and then what I kept catching was like they're motioning to the poll watchers. They're either giving a thumbs up
Oh,
or
wow.
or
So
a
this is
tip
an
of the
active
hat.
thing. At that point, it's oh, we just had our laptop up, it was an accident. This is more like they're running game.
Yeah, and that's what it tipped me to, right? Like there was this one, it's pretty funny. Like, if you're being coy, you're generally not as coy as you think you are, right? So there's this guy and he's sitting there and he looks at the poll watchers and but like it wasn't like a small thing, like it was deliberate. And I was like, what the hell was that, man? And then I watched and like tons of voters throughout the day are literally like, or pointing to him or like, nodding. And I'm like, this appears like they're checking in, quote unquote, right? So now I
I
get
mean,
to tell you what that.
materially, a voter can do a thumbs up, and there's nothing illegal about it. But when you add all the things up, it just starts to look pretty clear, right?
Yeah, yeah. So not one action is what we would call illegal per se, or like a scheme. It is illegal, but like not a scheme if what I end up putting together was independent of the rest, right? So by all means, especially in a small community, you may be tipping your hat to a friend that's sitting there. That would be explainable. Uh, so back to that complaint. When I was at the station and the person had walked up to me, they showed me a picture on the phone, and it was a poll watcher standing literally. So an electioneering zone, if you're familiar with that, it's like a perimeter around the polling location. You cannot electioneer in there. Um, it's kind of sacred space, right? Especially for the democratic process. So they take a picture of the lady on her cell phone who is a poll watcher. And in and of itself, I was like, oh, she's on her phone, but whatever. Yeah. And she goes, no, no, no. What I heard is, did you pay them? What are they driving? And then meeting people that got out. And I was like, oh man, okay. So that was what started that knot that I was saying, because that's a big deal. That's somebody incentivizing voters. That's highly illegal. And then if you're on the phone with somebody's coordinating receiving voters, right? So uh what ends up happening is there's a couple cameras in play. The inside camera, I have to find the moment that that person was in the station so that I know the timestamp. So I go to the outside camera, which has audio, and I find it. I match. So I can see now this poll watcher get up, walk outside, pick it up on the outside camera on the phone, and hear what she says. And the wind cut out the part that would be like the pay. So it was like, okay, but very clearly you can say, is this the vehicle that's pulling into the station right now? Right. And then like motioning to these two people that get out, come over inside of that election perimeter. And then you can hear like instructions and names. And I was like, now there's a scheme. Now there's election fraud. But I didn't stop there. So I wanted to figure out if all of those voters were checking in, or it was kind of like, the happenstance. I just knew these people. And so what I eventually caught is it's kind of a Newton law thing, right? Like if there's an action and a reaction that confirms something. So I started picking up that every time there was a nod or a thumbs up or something of that nature, the poll watchers would take an action with their hand, and it was consistent. And so I had to like pour through until I found a frame where it was obvious. And in the hand is, and again, on my Justice for Holt, I've got this up, people can see it, but it's a trap counter, those circular things with the button.
Yeah, click, click, click.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my God. So they're receiving, they're somebody's coordinating, they're receiving them, they're getting confirmation and they're counting them. And then like all of them have them so they compare numbers. So they're all working together. And I was like, that's the scheme. But it's not enough to guarantee a victory, right? Because if the other side has a great showing, you only are tabulating what you know that has been coordinated to show up. So
Man,
you
this was
have
the
to know.
this is a theory behind if there was any type of chicanery back in 2016 or 2024. It's just it had to be a landslide to overcome the problem.
Yeah, yeah. So there's room for that. So in my investigative skills here, I'm literally just like, okay, I've uncovered the scheme, but it doesn't guarantee a victory. No, there has to be another part. If that other part exists, that's full circle. Um, And so then I found it. There's another camera that most of the day is just an empty room, but it happened to be where they counted ballots. So like the official ballot counts were taking place in this room, and they set up underneath one of the security cameras. So now I've got that, and I didn't watch it originally because when you open a clip, it's just an empty room, right? So I had to like go through and find, and what I ended up finding was the most alarming part of it. Um, I make no accusations of the people paid to be election judges or officials, but they were content, I will say, with seeing election fraud and not stopping it. And there's two clips that are up on my socials on Justice for Holt, but one is was the first one I caught. You've got a poll watcher with a track counter in plain sight. So if you look at this ballot counting room, it's literally a fold out table. Two paid election officials sit on one side with the key to open the election box, right? The official stuff. And on the other side is poll watchers. And the laws I had printed out said they can be within 6 feet of that and observe it. They were
Gotcha.
within that 6 feet, of course. They were close enough where you could see a name on a table, a ballot, and read who the voter was and who they voted for, which is super illegal, right? Um, they were that close. But what was more concerning to me is in plain sight is a track counter, and an election judge would read out names. There's 5 seats, so they read out 5 names, and you can see him, which is in visual line of the election judge and audible on the recording. Click, click, click.
So let's kind of skip forward because, let's if they're tallying up or they're tabulating, I imagine they have like a goal where they need to reach a certain amount of votes to guarantee their victory.
Yep.
And I imagine they're probably if they're videotaping, you know, everybody taking their vote, which is completely illegal. It's supposed to be a secret ballot. If
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, then they know who's who and what's what, and so they're going to have to call in more people. And um, so,
Yep.
was there any other obvious like fraud type related stuff that you found? Smoking gun, like was there really something that stands out to the whole situation to where it was like completely clear beyond those things,
Well, no, I mean
which are
that's
clear
so all of
violations,
it.
by the way, in and of themselves?
Yeah, it was enough to put it together that they knew the counts during the day and they were confirming those counts in the ballot counting room, reporting them out. But then there was one conversation that took place towards the end of the day where one candidate and 3 poll watchers meet directly under the camera, and there's clear audio. And they're like, oh, yeah, here's the vote numbers. If we're below, I think it was 800, the lady says, if we're below 800, we got this. And then, like, the poll watcher's like, oh, yeah, I've been in there counting. We know the count, So like it all came together. Like there was no questions about it anymore.
Yeah, if they said that on video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to kind of speed through, I literally called the attorney that represents the district and said, hey, this is what I've been doing the last few days, and there's something bad. And she's like, all right, so she's legal counsel for the district, not for me, not for the board, for the actual tax entity that is the district. And she's like, look, I've got to report this. Independently of that, the outgoing board president, who obviously the incumbent, who was my supervisor at the time, I informed her of what I find too. She files a court injunction to stay the election. The attorney, unbeknownst to me, reports it to the DA's office. Um, and I'm communicating with everybody, of course, but like I called the DA's office. I'm like, hey, I need to meet with the DA. And they kind of laughed at me, right? Like, this is a funny, like how naive I was, but they're like, you can't talk to the DA. I'm like, I need to talk to somebody. This is what I've got. So I get a call back. It's a criminal investigator who's a law enforcement officer. I meet with him. I show him the footage. Obviously not all 48 hours, but I show him the most like jump out at you things, and he like I give him the whole entire everything, the thumb drive. He gets an Excel spreadsheet with who committed the crime, what election code it was, what time it happened, all this stuff. So hundreds of them documented, like a full. If I was an investigator, I'd be like, thanks, bro. You saved me so much time. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and so like I think I'm done with it, right? Like I've turned it over to law enforcement, go back to doing my thing, not getting involved with it. I've still got a fire department to lead. Um, But when the board president had filed the court thing, she had to post a public notice to delay the transition meeting, which was within her statutory rights to do that, and was allowed to. But these other people found out they're in a criminal investigation now, and so they are in a hurry to get seated and start making decisions. Um, and there's a lot of details here, but please just go to my page. It would take forever to kind of go through. But basically, what happens is these people seat themselves and like on social media and like show up at the station like we're in power. And I write a memorandum to the attorney that represents the district, that I sign. It's got my signature, and it was literally like this foreshadowing. It ended up being, but like, who is the legal board? As the fire chief, it places me in a really precarious situation of not knowing who has authority. And my fear is that it will interrupt operations of the fire department, which is the top priority. And so May 25th, just, what, 3 weeks after the elections, these people declare themselves seated. Their first order of business was a email to me with a bunch of "you'll do these things" orders, right? Which isn't typical anyways. But number one on the list, give us the locations, username, and password to the security system. Literally number one item. Now, if you're a board of directors for a fire department, that's probably not your number one priority, but it was really telling that that was their top concern, right?
Right.
Um, so they're under criminal investigation. The next day, the board president, Paul Del Toro, commits bank fraud. He goes to the bank. He says, "I'm the board president. I want to freeze the bank accounts," which nobody would ever do. Let's be very clear. Like, you don't freeze bank accounts for a fire department. Um, but he
No.
does. He does. So he goes a couple days later. This is all discovery after the fact. I don't know this during the time it all happens. But the bank's legal team comes back and goes, "This guy's not on the bank account. He has no authority or anything. Like, this
Yeah,
is bank
that's
fraud."
bank fraud.
Yeah. So he went in as a non-signatory. Um, and so the corporate bank freezes the accounts. Like, this has to get settled, right? And so there's some authorizations that need to happen, all this stuff. But these people are focused on their under criminal investigation and seizing power. So they're not trying to work their way out of situations or like work through situations that best serve the fire department and the community. They're in self-protection mode. So they stay quiet. Fast forward to June 5th, so a week and a half later, right? I start getting bill collectors calling, or but like utilities called me like, "Hey, your automatic draft got sent back as whatever, declined. We need payment for your light bill and internet and all that." I'm like, "That's weird, okay." And then our fuel company, so we get fuel deliveries at the fire station. They're like, "Hey, we got this, declined thing. We can't deliver fuel until it's paid." And I'm like, "What the hell?" So I call Paul Del Toro, the board president, and I'm like, "What's going on?" He does not tell me that the bank has now hard froze the accounts because he committed bank fraud. He had informed me that he had frozen bank accounts, which I thought was weird, but it wasn't my purview, right? I'm the chief, I'm not the board. So he doesn't tell me that like the bank got upset and he committed bank fraud. So I get a bunch of calls June 5th. The other one of the other board members, Alan Schultz, files a response to the court on that court injunction that had been filed, emails it to me, and I'm like, "I'm not a party to that. That's you and the old board." Uh, and he fires back like, "You better read it. I've asked the court to charge you with felonies for accessing, the security footage and reviewing it." Uh, and I was like, "Huh." So now he's attacking me because he now knows that I am the one that reviewed it, turned it over to law enforcement, right? So I immediately emailed the board like, "I'm invoking my indemnification clause. Like, that means that, you know the because I did this, like, you guys have to protect me so I can do my job." They ignored that. June 6th, the next day, apparently the insurance company calls Paul Del Toro and says, "Your insurance bill didn't get paid. We're going to cancel." And this is where things get real crazy. Okay. So he is the only one, or the board is the only ones that know that they committed bank fraud. They have told nobody else. And so he is in a panic because insurance means like the department shuts down. So he claims that that's when he finds out that the bank made this decision. But I have all of the email traffic through Discovery. So 11 minutes after he gets a phone call and emails me, like calls me, um, that the insurance is going to get canceled, he then sends payment from his personal account. But his story is he called the bank, was on hold, got the manager, was informed, then turned around, called his bank, set up this ETF, and it got paid in 11 minutes. No, if you ever dealt with a bank, none of that is true.
None of that. Yeah, yeah. That's
So he got the
unrealistic
call.
at best.
Yeah, he got the call. He panicked. He made payment. And it sounds great that he did it from his personal account, but that's the only way it could take place because the legal framework from the bank said nobody will access a dime of this money. It's on lockdown.
So I can tell by, like, this conversation that you're very used to looking at the technicalities, and having to convince maybe a judge or jury. So clearly we're looking at, bank fraud, election fraud possibilities, allegedly, of course, right? So
Yes.
as you're presenting this to, law enforcement, and you're presenting this over to the authorities, if you will, how did that end up for you personally?
Um, well, as the story progresses, man, it completely defeated me. But I thought at the time, like when I'm talking to investigators and passing this information, they're like, "Oh, don't worry, we got you." Like this is very blatant. We're shocked at how blatant this is. And my whole time, I believe that they're investigating, which I will. If you give me just a minute, we'll get back right into that. Where it's like I know what happens now, but it took time.
Mhm.
In the moment, I'm communicating with these guys that are police officer, DA investigators, and they're telling me like they're shocked by what they're finding. And so my feeling is like I just have to keep the fire department operating, protect my firefighters, um, and keep responding to calls and like let this all work itself out. It's not my business at this point, right? Um, so that insurance bill gets paid, but an hour and 15 minutes or something like that later, I get an email from the board president saying, "Shut the fire department down. We cannot operate." Why, if you've made the payment, would you do that, right? What
Mhm.
happened in that hour and 15 minutes? And my belief is that the board got together and said, we need to take advantage of this opportunity because we're about to get exposed. So I literally have to post a memorandum on social media and our website that says we cannot respond to calls until this insurance situation resolves. And guess what happens when a fire department shuts down for some administrative? The news comes calling fiercely. And so we shut the fire department down for 5 hours, I think it was. Huge, huge, huge stain on everybody, right? The fire department cannot respond to calls. Um, yeah, and so I give an interview to the news because they came in. I was like, look, like there's a bunch of turmoil going on. I don't know what, it's not my business, but I know I'm being given illegal orders, and it literally shut a fire department down. And in my entire career, I've never seen anything like this. And man, they were pissed. So just to button up the story, 33 days from the first day I met with the criminal investigator, which was May 19th, 33 days later, a public meeting is held where the board brings a commercial popcorn machine and lemonade like it's a block party, and fire me from my position as publicly and humiliating as possible because the insurance bill didn't get paid on time. Um, so there's some points I skipped over. The bill was $23,095 by board policy and the bylaws of the district. I was authorized to make payment of up to $5,000. So I couldn't have paid that under the authority that I had. Um,
Okay.
the bank accounts were frozen, so like nobody could get paid. right? Like the $115 utility bill got kicked back as declined. So I couldn't have done that. And I also had no access to the QuickBooks system that I could input the information, print a check, or send an ETF. I never had access to that, nor was I authorized as a signatory on the bank. So it would have been an illegal signature for me to sign a check, right? But in the face of all of that, the board got together. They brought in this commercial popcorn machine and like made this jolly thing to humiliate me and fire me over that. Um, because obviously it's super illegal to go, we're firing you because you're cooperating with a criminal investigation against us,
So they used,
right?
again, they used a technicality, if you will, and it
Yeah, red herring.
might even be not truly usable, but they've got enough power just to railroad it through.
Yeah, and that's the game, right? Like they're in the seat, they hold the power by the vote. And so if three of them vote for anything, until an outside force comes in and says, we're charging you, or this is, they do get to do that. So I'm fired, man. And it's become so pivotal in the story for me in my personal journey because I knew what was happening. I knew that I had made a decision that got me into this, right? Like my interaction was because I investigated something. Um, but it's a very different feeling from the I know I'm doing the right thing to I now have to go home and face my kids. Man, and like I like it this well of emotion hits every time I tell this because I had I had 60 firefighters at that time that all loved me as their leader. I had, you know, business owners and all sorts of people that were there to support me at that meeting. And I went from that meeting a 2 mile drive home to face my daughters. And it was the longest drive of my life. I literally opened the door and my girls come running like they do for dads, right? Or the parents. And I'm literally looking them in the face and I feel like this lonely feeling of like, I just let them down. Even though I feel like I did the right thing, I let them down. And so I literally tell them like, I just lost my job and I don't know what that means. Like it as a dad, I'm like, I can't pay the mortgage, I can't pay for food, I can't buy you school clothes and basketball shoes. But I'm just looking at them and my girls are such badasses, man. They were like, okay. I'm like, we're gonna be fine, girls. I promise. I'm in a panic. And my girls are just like, no doubt in the freaking world, bro. Like they're just like stone cold. Like we know you're
They know
good.
you got
We
it.
got yeah. And
Yeah.
like man, that was probably the most powerful moment I've ever experienced, man. Like at my lowest as a dad, that I feel like I failed these girls. They have so much belief in me. They're just like, rock on, let's go, right? And they've been such champs through this situation, man. So I now don't have a job. I've got to figure out life, right? I'm blacklisted from my career that I've done 20 some odd years in very honorably. Um, so I piddled along for a few months, no job, collecting some unemployment, and like they fought me on that. I had to go through like this huge state process just to get $400 a week to feed my kids. Amazing support from friends and people that I made a difference or an impact on were supporting us how they could. Which sometimes like here's a pound of ground beef, which meant the world to us at the time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But it gets to a point where it's an emergency situation. So I literally sell my home, my only asset, where my girls live, right? Because I had some equity. I pay it to an attorney. Like here's all this money and I have some to live off of, but I have no job. I've interviewed hundreds of times by this point. Um, I can't find a job. I'm living in Colorado. I don't have a home. And so literally like we're staying in a hotel with my Dalmatian and my two daughters. And I'm just like, I call family, I'm like, hey, I, I got a little money to feed them, but like this isn't sustainable for long. And so I literally packed my truck up, moved halfway across the country to move into a trailer in my stepdad's backyard.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay. So I get it, but if you think about that, if you're a man with a family, I've got 2 kids,
Yeah.
having to do that, shoot, man, that's it's a lot to your ego. It's a lot to a lot of people are concerned about appearances. Like, what I'm trying to speak to is the willingness that the extent that you're willing to go to stand up for what's right. And this is, a step that you get to, right?
Yeah, man. Talk about a fall from grace. When you're like a very highly public figure, and 6 months later, you're living in a trailer a camper trailer in the backyard of your stepdad's home with your kids and your dog, right? And my girlfriend that I met during this journey, and I never. This is the great thing about life. Like I never faltered that I would recover. It just day by day, like I was with my kids every day. My life felt very rewarding, even though I'm losing everything. And so I stayed fervent in that. My girls stayed 100% like fervent that even though we're living in a camper, we're having fun every single day, and they see the good in the world, right? And so I do get a job. We do find a rental house, like we're start to build, and that's where we're at now. But life's good. We're surrounded by family. We are very tightly bonded, so through it all, still extremely rewarding as a person, as a dad. That's so much more important than like what my position was as a fire chief, right?
Mhm.
Although I loved that and I worked hard to achieve that, that was not the thing that was most important to me. So
Well, and your
through the
daughters are gonna learn by example. You have principles as they get older, and they have families of their own possibly, they're gonna know what kind of I mean, they already know, but once they have their own kids, they're really gonna get it. Like,
Mhm.
it takes a lot to stand up, what is it? Speak truth to power at the risk of losing it all.
Yeah.
But principles, when somebody remains principled, that there's something to be said for that, and it's a very American thing going back for hundreds of years, and it's really what I think is missing in a lot of society today. I heard somebody talking earlier about, oh, maybe there's going to be a civil war. Oh, sure, you're always going to hear that kind of stuff, and the
Right.
guy who was having that conversation was actually a kind of a hard left guy, and he even, you could argue, has been a little bit radicalized based on the groups that he's involved with. But his comment was, he goes, "Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I think people like to remain comfortable. If you take away all the food, you take away all the shelter, and people start to get hungry, that's when you're going to see a civil war." So even a guy who is kind of on what I would think is almost the radicalized left, to admit that it's like, no, people are not going to give up their comforts. What you've done is given up all those comforts for what you saw as right. And you found your way through it. And it sounds to me like you must be a good father, because your daughters completely supported you the whole time. They didn't complain about, not having this dress or those shoes. I mean, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but from what you're saying, that they have your back, man.
They do, man, and it comes full circle. So there's like this final leg of it was, I guess if you wanted to call it a chapter, is like defeat, right? So I had filed a federal lawsuit, and
I'm sorry to
I
interrupt you, brother. Look, Timothy Mack here, he brings up something here. You got to find a way to sue their surety bond, and you and I could talk about that a little bit later. But any public like figure, anybody who's holding like a public position, they have to have a surety bond. And if
yeah.
you do it the right way, there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. And if you do it the wrong way, it could become a big problem for you. But I don't know what else they can take from you at this point. So, you know,
No, they couldn't, and like this is where like you're proud of yourself, but like they could only take my job, right? That's the only thing that I've ever given them power to take, which is through this journey has been tough. So the final chapter though is I'm going through a federal lawsuit. When I get fired, the criminal investigation is still ongoing. So like, even though I'm fired, I'm like, there's still an end game to this stuff, right? And we did look at surety bonds and stuff. That's a very hard, especially in Colorado, that really doesn't exist because of nobody will enforce laws there. But um, on like in August, right? So I got fired in June. In August, I get a random call kind of suddenly from the investigator. He's like, "Hey, we're dropping the case as a no file." And I'm like, "What's that mean?" He's like, "We're not filing any charges." And I was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh," and he won't answer questions. He's very abrasive with me. And I was like, "What the F, man?" And I felt powerless, but I was like, all right, well, I still got this federal lawsuit. Like, that's when I'll get to show evidence, right? And I'll get to a jury, and this will get rectified. And so I just moved from one belief system to the next of like, okay, law enforcement failed. At least the judicial will uphold the law. And it took 2 years, man. 2 years to battle through procedure. That's it. No evidence ever, right? And procedure is this like, oh, we don't want to face the evidence, so we're going to motion to dismiss this, right? And if it fell on that, then they find another loophole, so they're constantly looking for that angle. And so in my case, the thing that survived was First Amendment protected speech. And if we go back to what I did as an individual versus what I did in my official capacity as fire chief is the delineating factor. And so they filed for motion for summary judgment. I thought there's no way in hell. But the federal judge, on the broadest evaluation imaginable, said, as the fire chief, it was my official duties to investigate this election fraud and review footage because I was the fire chief. I was a public official. And that's just too broad of a picture. An official duty is what you pay me to do. As the fire chief, you paid me to lead and train firefighters to respond to emergency calls to manage a budget. You do not pay me to be a criminal investigator. That's nowhere in my job description, right? You don't. You can't claim that it's an official duty if I'm doing it off the clock at my own expense. But I digress. That happened. The federal judge dismissed my case that I was the fire chief. Basically, anything that fell within that was a duty of mine. Therefore, I'm not protected by the First Amendment. And you want to talk about like a crushing defeat? That was my last, right? I was crushed, man, just in despair. Um, and my attorney calls and he's like, "Do you want me to file an appeal? I don't agree with the judge." And I'm like, "I don't agree with it either." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." He's like, "Okay, 50 grand up front." And I'm like, I'm still living in the damn trailer at this point, right? I have nothing. And even if I had it, I couldn't give it because I have to protect being able to feed my kids. And so literally like I give up. I gave up, bro. I called my friends. I called everybody I knew. I said, "I'm done. I give up. I lost." Like, there's nothing in this system stands on character and morals or the law. Nobody will enforce it, and the system's broken. And I just for like a week was just like, whatever. I don't care. Move on with life.
Yep.
But I did care. So one night I'm sitting eating dinner with my kids, man, and like my brain is running over accepting this, and they're chatting like teen girls do. I'm sure everybody's been around a teen girl, right? They yapping, um, and I'm in their presence, but like the room is silent. I can't hear them speaking, and I just remember like it's such a powerful moment for me because I'm just like seeing them talking, smiling, and I'm just like grappling with this, and like suddenly it clicks, and I'm like, there ain't no effing way. As a dad, I'll show them I'm quitting. It ain't happening, right? Like, and then you just feel that like dad rage, man. And I
Yep.
like in that moment, I said, nope, I'm not quitting. Nope. And so like life changed all of a sudden, man. I literally don't have an attorney to represent me. I've lost my federal case. I start reading case law and I start learning as much as I can about the First Amendment, protected speech, all these cases, thousands of pages of stuff, and I file an appeal on my own. And in that decision, my attorney never wanted me to talk about this stuff, never wanted to show anything. And I said, I might not ever get a victory in the court. I might not ever get a victory in anywhere else, but American people will see this as much as I can. And so I did that. And I filed my briefs. And in that came a startling discovery. And it's kind of my final piece of it because it takes us to current day. I'm reading all of my case stuff and I catch two names. And subconsciously, man. Because like I'm in bed asleep one night, and I shoot up like a bolt of lightning hit me, and
Oh, nice.
two synopsises in my brain connected while I was sleeping, and it woke me up. And the guy, this is how I saw it. I was going over the investigator files, and on like whatever date it was, I can't remember it now. But the guy with the authority is named Andrew Vaughn. He's the chief deputy district attorney, and he spells it Vaughan. And I was
Okay.
like, cool. And then in something else I was reading, because when you're litigating, you don't always know the players, right? I know the attorney's name that represents these people, but the law firm is called Vaughn and DeMuro Law Firm, and it's spelled the same spelling as the guy that dismissed the criminal investigation. And those are the two pieces of information that jolted me awake. And so the next morning, I sent it to a PI and I said, "Hey, man, is there a relationship here?" And he sends a report back like, "Yeah, it's father and son." And so then I go to the timeline and I look, the day I get fired was June 22nd. July 14th, I file my lawsuit. Okay, it takes a week to process. Like it goes to insurance signs a contract with a law firm. That lands us on this day. And the widest range and the most gracious is 7 days between what ends up being father's law firm taking defense and son canceling the criminal investigation. My timeline shows it was probably a 3 day. So over a weekend, dad takes it, calls son gets rid of this because he can't defend it. And that discovery has kind of broken things open a little bit because now I'm in contact with the DA's office. Like, no, this is immoral. This is conflict of interest. So I found out the reason why these people never got held accountable. And now I've got something to reopen. And so I'm hoping real soon here there'll be some steel bracelets soon, because that's what should happen. It's on video evidence. So if it's fair and impartial by law enforcement, and that guy's no longer working at the DA's office, so that he can't get in the way now. So hopefully, we'll see some stuff. But I also started talking about it. And I started interviewing. And I started showing the evidence. I started showing the videos, and that brings us to today, man. I'm here, um, massively in debt from
Yeah.
attorneys, but strong in my character, man, and strong in the lessons that I'm teaching my kids. And I want to share that story because that's
No.
victory.
Well, you know what? As this progresses, do me a favor and let me know kind of what's going on with this, especially this current, whether it's fair and impartial, whether we actually get a proper decision. And we'd love to kind of have you back on as this thing develops. And either way, what happens, please let me know.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I hope to see some movement soon. I do have a legal fund that stepped up that will do my oral arguments in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. So we're just all briefs are filed. I think there's no chance that a panel confirms the judge's decision. I think it's way too crazy. So I do expect to get some victories, but really, man, the message I have is the victory is how you handle yourself, and I never gave up my morals. I never gave up on what I believed in. My kids never gave up on me, and that's what victory is, brother. That's really what it is. I may never win in the court,
Well,
but I
that's
just want
okay. It's again, like you just said, winning in the court and a real life victory, two different things, but also that would be another victory if you get that done in the court. And there are times when, these kind of cases will actually set precedent. I don't know that this would,
it
but
would.
man, yeah, it would then.
Once you're in the appellate course, whether it's confirmed or it's reversed, it's case law. So all of my briefs cite Circuit Court of Appeals or Supreme Court cases that have progressed to them and been confirmed or reversed. That's how
Gotcha.
that's how federal court works. So, yeah, that is the broader implication. Is if it's affirmed, then public officials have no protections exist, and I think that's one reason that the courts will be very hesitant to affirm that, or they kick it back and say no, that's way too broad, and then it's case law that the appellate court has confirmed that like you can't apply such a broad stroke to that. And so that's where we're at, man. I There's still battles. I'm getting threatened to be sued by the attorney because I own like 40 grand still. So I do have my my charity stuff, which is very hard for a person like me to ask for. But they are out there. If somebody hears this and wants to support, I'd appreciate it.
I
Whatever
think we
that
put
is.
the pretty sure I put that stuff in the links here. Give me just 1 second to confirm that.
Okay.
Either way, how to reach you, how to find you, it's all in the links, in the show links.
Yeah.
But let me
Please do
just
reach
do a
out.
see here. Yeah, GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go, social media, it's all in there.
Okay.
So,
Awesome.
Erik Holt, absolute animal, risking it all and risking it for our good and everybody's good. And I saw a lot of comments in the comment section saying, once a fireman, always a fireman. And now
That's
the kind
true.
of fires that you're trying to put out are just as important. I mean, you might not be, pulling babies out of a burning building, but you're trying to keep our country from burning down. So, my hat is off to you, and I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. And like I said, please send me a message. Let me know as things develop, and we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, I will. I will come. I'll come with all the updates for you guys, and please follow my socials. If people want, they can reach out to me. I answer everything. I'll try to get back in your comments and respond. But I just appreciate the support. The support is what keeps me going for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, if if anybody is willing to, please, take a look at the GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go. Spread this video around. A lot of people in this audience are patriots. It's a big deal. Like this video is going to be seen by a lot of people. So the more people can spread this video around, perhaps we can support Erik in this mission.
Yeah, and even just positive messages, man. Like there's days that just you get frustrated and you see a positive message and like I'm making a difference in somebody's life or the future of something. And so that's just support in any kind, man, is so appreciated. It's something I never ever expected when sharing a story, but it's very rewarding and I love this country. I love what we're founded on and I want to see it thrive. I mean, plain and simple, we have a democratic system. It is our civic duty to defend it.
Agreed. Agreed. Thanks again for coming on, spending your time with us. Everybody, like I said, look in the description. I don't think there will be a Vela show tomorrow. There may be. I need to talk to Velas and see if there is. But either way, thank you all for watching, and we will see you as soon as tomorrow, probably Monday.
Thanks, brother.
Hey, no problem.